Hello friends, welcome to the new series of state management course. In this tutorial, we will talk about one of the most popular state management tool, which is Provider. Let's get started. First of all, in order to use Provider, we should install the package. And for installing, we can go to the View and from here select Command Palette. And here just type dart add dependency. From here, you can select the package that you want to install, or you can just simply search. And as you can see, we are getting this provider. Click to it, got dependencies. And if you go to the pubspec YAML, we will see that provider package is installed. Before starting to explain how should we use provider, I would like to make some changes to our application. Currently, as you see, all the codes is located inside of main Dart. As your project gets bigger, you cannot write all the codes inside of one document. What can you do? You can get some codes and place them inside of separate files. In this case, your code will be clean and easy to optimize. So what can we do? Here we have a class, which is my app. So I can take this, just cut it from here. I will create a new file inside of lib folder, which is named app.dart, and just place this code inside of this file. Then we should import the material Dart, and also we have to import my home page. After that, you will get some error because it says my app is not recognized. There is no any class inside of this main Dart. That's why we have to import it from app.dart because the code is inside of this document. Then also we can get this my home page, place it inside of separate file. So I will cut this code from here. Then I will create a folder. Let's name it screens. And inside of the screens folder, I will create a file which is named my homepage.dart. Okay, then place the code inside of this file, import stateless widget from material Dart, then there is no any error. But inside of the app Dart, we are getting error because we get the code from the main Dart, place it inside of my homepage. That's why it says that this import is useless right now. We will import this my homepage from my homepage.dart file. Now, as you can see inside of the main Dart, we have very short code, and then our home page is inside of this file, and our material app is inside of app.dart. Now we can start to use provider. For using provider, I will create a class which is essential to provide the values. And this class should be located inside of provider folder. Inside of the lib folder, I will create providers folder, and I will place all the providers that I have for this application inside of this folder. Then inside of providers folder, I will create counter provider.dart file. Then I will just create a class which is named counter provider. Then I will place all the variables that I will provide to my application. First of all, I need a counter value, which is going to be 0, and the type of it is integer. Then we have to create a method which will increase value of the counter. So void increase counter. And here I'm just going to say counter plus plus. So that is going to change the value of counter. But the problem here is currently we are not using the provider. And if I get this counter and place it inside of my home page, inside of this text widget. And if I call this increase counter method from the floating action button, nothing is going to change in the screen. Basically, again, our screen will be static. In order to make it reactive, we have to do some changes in this class. Basically, we need to use provider. First of all, we have to use change notifier for this counter provider. I will say with change notifier. So why we are using this change notifier, which is a mixin, because there is a method inside of change notifier that we need. And this method is notify listeners. After we increase the value, we just need to use notify listener method. And when we are using this, that basically means we want to notify all the listeners. Because the value is changed, we have to say that, well, we have changed the counter value, just listen to it. Then after this setup is done with this class, we can go to the app.dart file and we can provide our class, which is counter provider. So here we have a my home page. And as you know, inside of the home page, there is a text widget which we want to change. And here we have to provide this counter provider class to this my home page, because inside of the my home page, we have a text widget. So here we are getting error because we have to restart application. So error is gone. And here we have to provide value for this text widget. That's why over this my home page, we have to provide our class. Here, I'm just going to use change notifier provider. So this is something that comes from provider package. That's why it's important to install it. Then after this change notifier provider, we have to put all the required fields. Here, as you see, we have a create method which is required. That's why I have to create something inside of change notifier provider. Automatically Dart provides me some codes. For example, I'm going to use this one. This is the function that gets context, and using this context, it is providing some value for the child object, which is my home page. I will return my class, which is counter provider, because all the values that we want to provide is inside of this class. Here, I will return counter provider. I have to import it. And as you see, there is no any issue. Again, this create property is used for providing values from the class. And that class should use the change notifier. Otherwise, it is not going to provide anything for the child object, which is here. And the child object is the listener, which is listening to this counter provider class. So we can go to the my home page, or from these files, we can go to this document, and here we can create the instance of the provider. To create the instance is very important because we will get function from there. And here we have the increase counter function, which we need inside of the my home page. Inside of the build, which is recommended, we have to create the instance of provider. And we can create it using provider dot. So first of all, we have to import it from the provider package dot auth. Then inside of this method, we have to use context, and that's it. So that context is this context. Additionally, for this code, we have to specify which provider we will be using. And after this auth, we can specify it. It says counter provider. Okay, now there is no any issue. And if I come here and press dot, you will see that we are getting counter, And also, if I type increase, we are getting the increase counter method from this instance. I will store this instance inside of a variable. So final provider equals to this one. Where should we using this provider? First of all, we have to use it inside of this text. And secondly, we have to use it for this floating action button. For the text, we can get counter value, which is inside of this class. We can say provider dot counter. We can wrap it with the curly braces, and before this curly braces, we can use $sign. That is string interpolation. We have to call the method which is inside of counter provider, and we can call it from the floating action button on press property. Here, I will say provider dot increase counter, and that will be all about using provider. In this case, this text widget will be reactive, which means it will listen to this counter value because we are using this mixin, which is change notifier, and every time this counter value changes, we are notifying the listeners. And the listener is my home page because here inside of the app dart, we are providing this counter provider and using this child, which is listener. So if I restart my application and if I click to this floating action button, as you can see, this text widget is a reactive widget right now. Inside of this instance, there is an additional property which is listen. So why should we using this listen property? For example, if I say true, that means we are listening right now. And if I say false, that means we don't want to listen anything that comes from this provider. So when that can be useful, let's say there is some value that is inside of this counter provider I want to use inside of my home page. But I don't want to listen to the changes, which means I am using something from this provider, but I'm not interested in the changes. Basically, I'm saying that if any value changes inside of this counter provider, don't let me know, I'm not listening. So if I hot restart and go to my application, and if I click to this floating action button, nothing is changing, but we are getting this 0 from this counter provider. But if I make this listen true, that basically means we want to listen to the changes. And if I click to it, as you see, we are listening. If you want to use simpler syntax for creating the instance of provider, you can use context.read, and here you can specify the provider which we will be using, which is counter provider, and then use parentheses. That is one of the syntaxes that you can use for creating the instance of your provider. And if I restart my application and click to this floating action button, as you see, nothing is changing in our screen. That's happening because we are using read right now. And read means we don't want to listen. Basically, this one is the same with this one. Provider of counter provider context and listen to false. This syntax is the same one with this one. If we want to listen, which means listen should be true, what can we do? We can use watch. Watch is something also can be used if we want to listen to this provider. Okay, that one is the same syntax with that one. If I hot restart my application, and if I click to this floating action button, as you see, again, our text widget is reactive.